Hey guys, welcome back to the Tough Love Podcast with Dr. John O'Connor. Today's podcast is about seizing the moment. This weekend, we had an amazing opportunity to be the co-sponsor for an international credentialing organization that was talking all about shockwave medicine, and there was medical providers there from all the world, and it was absolutely impressive. My co-host, Matt Calabria, is with me today, and we're going to talk about seizing the moment in business, in life, and everything you do. Matty, what's up, kid?
Great. Not much. Good to be back.
So, what an event.
Yeah, I mean, super excited. You're always talking about seizing every moment, soaking it up. I mean, you were fortunate enough to be invited down by Dr. John Fernandez to represent all shockwave providers down there. And tell your fans more. I mean, what did you take of it? How was your experience with it? I know you spoke in multiple times throughout the weekend. How'd it go?
It was amazing. At first, I was super intimidated. I was blessed to have Jessica down there with me. She was super encouraging and, was the first one to be like, hey, that was the best you've sounded in any of your events. And, my mini-me was back here holding it down. When you're going on these things, you don't realize it's not what we've done in our 20 plus years in healthcare. So my daughter was back here and she had the dogs and they're getting older. And, when I tell you she's my mini-me, she's my clone. So, she's sending me funny pictures. I think she came out of the weekend with a hamster and she ended up at Nanny's house and we almost had a kitten too. I have to say that I was blessed to have her and, she's been, I was thinking about the other day and, talking about what we're talking about today, and a memory popped up and her and I were down in the basement and she was dribbling. She was so little, she was dribbling between my legs, right? Literally. And I'm smashing basketballs, getting ready for a training session. And she's literally like knee high dribbling basketball. And you start thinking about your why. And when I was down there and I'm texting her, hey, make sure the dogs are okay, make sure everything's good, it reminded me of my why. And so when I got up on stage, what I would say that has been different from attending Parker seminars or the Florida Chiropractic Association, this was ran by medical doctors. And in Europe, South America and the other countries that we're representing for the Society of Medical Shockwave Providers, these were trauma surgeons and orthopedic surgeons that had a plan of care that was so impressive to our minds as attending chiropractic physicians or physical therapists or occupational therapists or physiatrists that were in the audience. And there was, and again, I know you made mention earlier to Dr. John Fernandez. John did an amazing job. This was his first international event. He had to put it together. He paid for he funded the entire event. We funded the cocktail party alongside Softwave, Shockwave product. And, I couldn't be more honored and grateful for him putting me in that and putting me on that stage, because the people we got to speak to, our message resonated with them. And, you share those pain points and saying, not being around your kids or missing stuff because you have to work extra hours because you're not making enough money. Yeah. Or you buy equipment that you feel like it's not working, or looking a little deeper, looking in the mirror and saying, my system's not working. The science is there. What am I doing? And when I was listening to these medical providers talking about, and all the accents are going, and I'm not going to, have some comical, saying about how their accents were, but they're really funny because when they had their slides going up, they were like, we're doing an adjunctive, as we would call it, procedure such as shockwave, because obviously this was a shockwave credentialing event. And then they had biologics or, PRP, stem cell, other types of biological medicine. Yeah. And then their last option, and they were trauma and orthopedic surgeons, was surgery. And I wanted to hear if the other doctors, sitting for the CEUs were listening, and it didn't resonate to them like it does to me. But the average chiropractor doesn't have the relationship that I have with like a Dr. Van Gelderen or a Dr. Lisser in these local orthopedics that are, the president of orthopedics at Riverview or whatnot, or, any of these doctors that I've sent, a gazillion patients to over the years, or whether I'm sending HSS or Lenox Hill or NYU Langone. And I realized, I'm like, we're on to something, but my job's not done. I have to coach, and it starts with the education process. It starts with, a clarity board, not a vision board, but a clear message board.
Clear path.
Yeah, clear path. And I was intrigued because people didn't get honest until the 12th hour of the conference.
Yeah.
And they started walking up and they were like, we heard you speak and you're powerful.
Yeah,
Like you
well,
are.
I feel in the beginning of these, it's all about check out my new whip, check out my new shoes, check out this, check out that.
Yeah.
And then once you say one thing that really hits them hard in their pockets as business owners, they're like, you know what? It's time to open up.
Yeah. And that was it. When you're buying, the innovator, the founder of the company was there, right? And impressive business resume. I looked at him on LinkedIn. I looked at his, I Googled him. This guy has started business. He is remarkably successful. He loves this device. He resides in Georgia, and I studied this podcast that was sent to me, about 3 of them. And he was exactly like he was on the podcast. His family was there, and, he was as good with that product as the medical providers that were, traveling in from Europe or wherever they came from.
Yeah.
And it was impressive. And there were just messages that I didn't agree with, right? Coach K is not going to coach like Roy Williams.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And so it's not like they're both not Hall of Fame coaches.
Yeah.
They're just not going to coach. They're just not winning a national.
Right.
They're not winning a chip the same way.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my takeaway. I liked the success. You can't argue with the track record, but it's not my way. I like a thin crust. I don't like Sicilian.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when the doctors came up to me, there were a lot of them that were, I got it. I got this. I got that. But when you really heard them talk, it was hollow. Wasn't
Comes
real.
down to having one machine and properly implementing, as opposed to 5 and not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say the bulk of the practitioners there, and there were a lot of little sub stories going on. And I'm an observer, right? It's something I always say, and you know that about me.
Yeah.
That I'm always like watching the room, right? Yeah. And soft science was the giant in the room, and I was intrigued by how the confidence and the swag, and these were not guys that I normally have been like, impressive.
Definitely.
But I will tell you, in that moment, they were King Kongs.
Right.
And, Stores Medical was present, and to the relevance of our podcast, unless you're in healthcare, you're not going to know who they were, but there were some major players there. And then there were people outside the cuff. My guys from MedRay were there. A huge shout out to them for showing up. They do have a SoftWave and Shockwave device they're bringing to market. That's badass. We're actually doing a box opening ceremony next week for them and bringing it into the Velocity Performance line.
Awesome.
And but I'm going to tell you that it was funny seeing companies that do $100 million in sales being intimidated.
Right.
Or feeling like they underperformed.
Yeah.
And I looked at it like, wow, I'm on the national stage. I realized there is such a need for what we do at Velocity HP Coaching, and that my desire to be great is far superior to the fear that I had to get on that stage.
Right.
And when I went to get on that stage, it was pretty funny because I had just sent a text to my daughter about the hamster, because she legitimately got a hamster. And I had chuckled because she responded back like, basically, do not flush the hamster. And I was kidding. Of course I wouldn't. I was like, D, it's all good. Hamster's safe. But the moral of the story was, I wanted to take a chuckle because it was impressive to me, or an honor to me, to follow up after a guy that does reconstructive spine surgery
Right.
talking about the same device.
Right.
And when we walked in the clinic today, we had a remarkably successful day on patient outcomes and patient education, and new patients being admitted, and
Showed that
registered
the
to the practice.
system truly works.
That I wish I had more video content to show them that, like, literally. By the way, this is the list of society members that we're teaching.
Right.
And by the way, they're all MDs.
Yeah.
So like I said, I was blown away. It was a great opportunity.
No, absolutely. And, behind that comes humbling feeling too. So when you were speaking each and every time, now this is really your first national speaking event with hundreds and hundreds of providers and doctors for one thing, and that was soft wave and shockwave therapy. How did you feel deep down when you were up there speaking, looking around the room? Like, we made it. This is great. Were you nervous? Tell your listeners.
What's the funniest? Flying down, I was listening to David Goggins. And normally when I go to these things, I'm all about Hormozy.
Yeah.
But I had a feeling the wow factor of this big boy device, right? I mean, there were major players there. And the second most expensive device was $40,000 cheaper than the major player.
Right.
And I had to be like, I don't use this device. So, and the CFO, COO, chief founding, whatever you want to call him, was there. And I'm like, I belong here because the one thing I know, I'm one of one.
Right.
And those guys, maybe there's two of them that generate more patient outcomes than I do with the devices I have. But I guarantee I'm crushing it within that realm in our core four. I'll go at any of them.
Right.
And, and I've always had that mentality, it's not the size of the dog, you know what I mean? But it's the size of the, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Yeah. And I wasn't going to back down. I knew they were Goliath. And every time one of them was saying something where I could feel like they were chirping a little bit, and we were talking about, like, I know you'd be my first base guy if I'm on short, that I'm not worried about it. If the fight's going to happen, Maddie's going to start it, and I'll come out. I'll be right behind him.
Yep.
And it wasn't like it was argumentative or ugly at all, but I felt like I had the ammunition, because the unique thing is we prepared with the academic side of it, the education component, but we're battle tested. We're using our products. We're showing patients results. They're writing the testimonials or filming testimonials, and they're experiencing what we're doing. And, I think the learning from that was all I needed to feel like, yeah, we're right where we need to be.
No, 100%. I mean, to not only represent some of these amazing companies that we have their machines in the clinic with, but also representing Velocity HP Coaching and what we stand for, right? That's teaching and coaching up other practices around the globe and their teams on how to properly implement these adjunctive systems. And to me, I feel it's honestly a blessing to see you and Dr. Horowitz down there having doctors and other providers, orthopedists, come up to you and ask for your advice on how you implement it.
It was wild. I was talking to an orthopedic surgeon from Germany, and we were sharing care plans and going back and forth on a professional basketball player. And I was saying, hey, this is what he did when he was playing in Belgium. And then when he got back to the States, I had to massage it with the orthopedic team here to get it through. I knew what I wanted to do with regards to our adjunctive medicine, but I knew this was something that was going to be outside of their comfort level. And, it was a hyaluronic acid. It was a cocktail, or if you will, like an ingredient list that I had never seen any of my orthopedics. And these are guys that I break bread with. These are guys that we have had fantastic results where we have, patients texting either one of us with a testimonial saying, most amazing experience. Thank God for Dr. So-and-so. My son, my daughter, or myself is on the mend, and I'm just so grateful for the referral. And, in that moment, I realized I'm like, hey, it's about education. It's about confidence. It's about being able to share a message, being clear and concise, and not losing focus of what you're trying to educate them with. And, as I was all over social media that weekend, two of my very good friends, Dr. Rudy Alfonso, that's down in Miami practicing, and then one of the practitioners up here, Dr. Peter Ferrara, were there, and both of them in their own right have remarkably successful clinical practices for 20 plus, 25 plus years.
Right.
And they were blown away by the opportunity to, teach, be taught.
Yeah.
They were like, can you show me how to do this?
Show me the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, that's beyond a humbling experience. And just to go through what you guys did for the 2 days, I mean, you got back at 2 a.m. this morning, and you were back in the clinic at 7:30. And that goes to show really, the drive and passion you have behind not only what we do in a rehab aspect, but on the coaching platform as well.
you know what? I was laughing because I wasn't sure if I was going to get there at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I knew I wasn't.
I gave you a follow-up call at 7:45. You answered. You said, "I'm on my way."
Yeah, at 4:30, I was like, "Hey, I'm up." But the one thing I realized is, and next week I'm not going to have that luxury. Our previous podcast we were talking about Christian, moving on into an awesome new career opportunity. Yep. When I need to show up, sometimes I take for granted how blessed I am to have you guys.
Yep.
I shouldn't say that. I get to relax because I know that you guys got my six.
Everything's taken care of.
Yeah, you guys got my back. The patients are, so grateful for the awesome care, the respect, the communication, and what you guys deliver. So I do think in that capacity it was awesome. But, the one thing that I realized is the importance of the follow-up. I have a Zoom I have to get scheduled for Wednesday.
Yep.
With a doctor out of California. I reached out to all the practitioners right away. One was a business manager. One was a practitioner in Georgia. And all's, a guy out of New York State, a doctor out of New York State. And then the entire list is coming to me, which I'm going to send a huge welcome email thanking them so much for coming and opening up, being honest.
Yeah.
If you're doing well, share your story. If you're not, share your pain. The common ground is reaching out for help is showing your strength.
Yep.
Not is showing your weakness.
Yeah.
Right? I always go back to, my kids on these kind of things. For my daughter, she's always been competitive and athletic. And, with school, she was struggling with some things. And she literally was like, hey, this isn't going right. And she wanted tutors. And, we saw the doctors and, whatever the case was, got her all the things she needed. And she's a straight A student. And that was the want that she had, that she was like, hey, I'm not where I want to be. And, like my son, he came from IMG, and, Coach Bob and the staff down there are amazing. They reach out and they don't have to do that, right? They don't care, even regardless of my resume, it could be as impressive as theirs in coaching. They're good humans.
Yeah.
And they're dads themselves.
Without a doubt.
And, but my son will text me, and a huge shout out to Steve Gallagher from the Fort. That's like his spirit animal. He likes to come home and get reps with him and just, and as a baseball guy, he likes to see the bat come off the ball. He likes to, talk through the hitting process.
Yep.
Working that outside pitch away, inside ball, turning on it, middle up the middle.
Yeah.
And, and that's learned for me.
Yeah.
Anybody, all my guys that are watching, like Jason Westerl and guys that know me forever, they're like, Doc sounds like a baseball guy.
It's like anything else, it's muscle memory.
I'm a
like
baseball
any
dad.
Sport. Yeah.
I'm a baseball dad. And, I try to know what I need to share with him.
Yeah.
Because if I don't know that language, the same thing in staff. And I got this from one of our very first business coach that we had. And they said something very valuable. If your language is not common to everybody, then you're not communicating properly.
No one will understand.
And the message that you're becoming frustrated with is not what is being said. It's the fact that you didn't make sure that everybody understands the language before it's spoken.
Right.
Right. And, I've never been one to be super deep in philosophy classes and that, definitely. But it really resonated with me because I know with Doc H and I, there's things that she does at such a high level. And sometimes I'll be powering through her in my normal bully kind of manner.
Yeah.
And then I'll take a deep breath and be like, she's right. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Let me take a step back and let her do what she does. And then I'm like, what she said,
Yeah.
you know,
100%.
and get behind it,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, that's a wisdom thing,
Yeah.
which means you got to kind of get old and grow into that,
Right.
because I think most people make their mistakes because the 1%ers, you know, and I've seen that with my athletes that are just elite. You didn't have to show them to do stuff. In 8th grade, they were special.
They just did it.
Whether they were big already or they just were remarkably athletic or their hand-eye coordination was there. But, you know, then it was effort.
Right.
And if they had effort, all of them became pros at some level.
They roll in 100%. The biggest thing out of this past weekend, what could you take away in regards to seizing every moment, seizing that exact opportunity? You have your follow-ups. We're going to schedule some Zooms, but what is the number one thing or the number one takeaway you have from being down in Orlando this weekend?
So that's a great question. When you're attending these conferences, I found that there's actually an algorithm that has to happen. And at the breaks, you need to be remarkably charismatic.
Yeah.
And you can't have this long-winded presentation and look at it as your time to run out.
Right.
You need to meet and greet. You need to meet fast. You need to motivate fast. You need to inspire fast. And that's where execution happens.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, when you first get there at these events, like I loved hosting the cocktail party. What I would have done different is I would have been mic'd up. I would have been the host with the most, if you will, and been like the MC of the event and talking about pearls of the trade that we bring to the table, talk about communication, talk about the importance of confidence and swag, and also talk about the importance of trust in relationships, right? When you instill trust from education, the patient relationship becomes bigger than the actual application because you've established a common bond of like the human condition.
Yeah.
Right. And that was pretty profound as I was watching some of the providers speak to other providers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, those are pearls. Like, I know what I do well. And this podcast, I was saying it over the weekend, when I'm on fire, I'm hard to be stopped.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
But I was outside my comfort zone. I mean, literally there was, 12 trauma surgeons that were global. There were 12 different languages being spoken. And by the way, there were 10 doctors that might have spoken 6 to 10 languages. I struggle with English.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And I was laughing because most of the other American physicians of whatever they were saying said the same thing. And there was a dozen US orthopedic and physiatrists and DOs there present. And I said, we take for granted how impressive they are in Europe, that they command multiple languages. There was a guy speaking Dutch, German. He was then speaking French with another doctor. And then he literally switched into English effortlessly, And by the way, there were other languages I couldn't identify that he was going with when he was screaming another doctor.
Yeah, definitely.
And they were all that way. And, that's the one thing that early on in my chiropractic career, there was a gentleman in town that played basketball in Notre Dame. Great man, super religious, spiritual. All his boys went to Christian Brothers Academy. He played basketball at Notre Dame and was a very good friend with Bill Walton. He spoke multiple foreign languages and had if I'm correct, I believe he spoke Mandarin.
Uh-huh.
And I ran into a rec league coach that him and I coached our sons together, and happened the name popped up, and he said, "You don't realize," and he has a voice like a James Earl Jones, like a very soft spoken, very calming, religious, spiritual, uplifting.
Yeah.
And which I had no idea. This guy was like a $10 million a year base salary kind of guy. That was like a one of one that was brought into companies. That was a god.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking was, I don't necessarily need to speak a foreign language. I need to speak the adjunctive language that all of these people understand.
Right.
And I realized we're kind of breaking the code because we are doing it right now, because the corporations are coming to us.
Yeah.
And, and you see it because you're my liaison to them.
Right.
And this weekend, the takeaway was, you know what? Matt and I are doing a great job. We need to reach back out to them.
Yeah.
And reinforce that we're climbing with our social media. We're doing the necessary steps to improve our message. We need them to improve their commitment to us. And together we can grow together and grow something that is most important. If you go to a school, it's your job to get good grades, right? The teachers do the subject matter. And if they're doing their job, it's your job to get good grades. When you buy a product, it's the company's job to give you a handbook how to use it for its uses and contraindications. Yeah. And when it's a service you're providing, right? An adjunctive service, an adjunctive technique, an adjunctive, code, whatever you want to say, a charge. I feel we have an obligation to be experts, to have a mastery above and beyond what's normal, to be not ordinary, but to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I know in what we do at Velocity Performance and Velocity HP Coaching, which stands for high performance, I think it's something that really needs to resonate. Right. And that was probably my biggest takeaway on the weekend. So, you know what, Matt, overall, the weekend was a smashing success.
Huge win.
We have to get technology on our side. I got to pay attention to more of these Ed Milet moments when they're promoting all these QR codes and these apps and stuff, because I get it now. When they're there and they're a big business, they have the budget to execute and get this information. But when you're an up and coming, a startup company, if you will, like we are, we have to figure out how to streamline that process and be able to acquire the information without creating this big budget to put ourselves in a hole. Because the same way these providers have bought these devices and now they're in a hole, two wrongs make a wrong, right?
Right.
We need to have compounding success, not compounding mishaps.
100%.
And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway of the weekend was streamlining, executing faster, message delivery in a matter of seconds over minutes or hours.
Yeah, right.
And also offering two forms of coaching. One would be a remote online, and then the other one would be like hands-on, we come to them.
John Taffer, Bar Rescue going in.
Yeah. And it was so funny because I literally got called that about 5 times this weekend. And they're like, wow, you're pretty intense.
Yep.
And they go, you're like David Goggins. I didn't know who that was. I didn't even know who the John Taffer was. They're like,
he's one of my favorite shows to watch, and I see you being just like him.
So when the guys were talking and they were like whiny and not taking, like when something goes wrong, unless really it's like, hey, Mark did that right there. Like literally, like you're watching a video, he screwed up, he dropped the ball, we lost the game. I mostly take full blame for that. If I gave it to somebody, I try to tell them, hey, did you get that done? They may be thinking that I'm like saying, I'm doubting them.
Right.
I'm like, no, I'm following up because I'm going to tell them, hey, my team did what you asked me to do. You're all set.
Yeah.
Right. And, and that's the way that I've always done what I do. And I think that's something that in the coaching is so important because I think follow through, commitment, and execution are probably the 3 biggest terms that I saw that every practice was lacking.
Without a doubt.
So anyway, you know what? The weekend, as today's podcast was about being powerful, about executing, about being thankful for being down the opportunity. A huge, again, thank you to John Fernandez and the society being created. There's a few more upcoming events. We're going to be hosting one at Velocity Performance in Freehold. And in the upcoming months, we'll be planning that very soon when he gets back from Florida. And I have to tell you, for us, it's going to be educate, motivate, elevate.
Yep.
That was something that kept popping into my head because the education is any patient is a consumer first, right? And then once they're a consumer, they need to be motivated. And that why is the message, the caring, the empathy that's shown from the coordinator to the patient educator. Yeah. And then the motivation comes from the success of all those components. And when the doctor walks in the room knowing he has a great product, that the motivation becomes that, just like I was talking about earlier, that the best exam and communication I had. And we didn't close that case. The person said, let me think about it. And I was okay with that because he was so appreciative of the knowledge we gave him that sometimes you lose and on the board it shows an L, but
That was a win.
That was a win.
That was a win.
And that was that. So like I said, today was a very unique episode to me because I learned so much, I learned being funny, like the, having the kids home and counting on them. They did a great job. I was thankful for my kids. As you referred to her, Doc H was by my side on the weekend. She was a pillar in my confidence.
Yep.
She was fantastic at communicating. There were doctors down that we knew, so she brought a level of calmness and put me in a nice mental state to be able to execute. And like I said, the group of medical providers that were there educating, I thought that they were very respectful. I don't know if that would be the same way if you had U.S. derived orthopedics. Yeah, right. But because their practice style is definitely a paradigm shift compared to what you see here in the United States, I think it was there. But anyway, like I said, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's podcast was brought to you by MedRay Lasers and Technology, one of the best Class 4 lasers in the market. I'm so thankful to have the relationship with them. If you enjoyed the information today, please share it with your friends. And most importantly, what we're looking for now is to comment and give us a review that you found this podcast to be helpful. Thank you again so much. And we look forward to sharing more stories like this in the days and weeks to come. God bless.